Right, Taz, I have a question for you.
Mm.
Who do you think is the most out of touch influencer?
Oh my gosh. That is a big question to
I
ask.
know.
Who is the most out of touch influencer?
Should I tell you
Um,
mine?
yeah.
James Charles.
Oh my god, yeah, he's a classic one to be
Because
fair.
did you see the recent thing with like the Spirit Airlines thing? I'm actually gobsmacked by that. I was watching clips of it this morning. I was like, oh my God, like what the hell?
No, what is that?
You've not seen it. Basically, like one of his followers like DM'd him and basically said like that they're gonna lose their job, like they work at Spirit Airlines, they're gonna like lose their job. And like basically he did this video where he was like, who the fuck cares and why the fuck would I give you money because you're gonna lose your job? Like he literally posted this and then he deleted it, and now obviously he's being called out and everyone hates him. And I just think, what an idiot. What possesses you to number one think like that, but then number one to record yourself and post it?
I honestly think this about like James Charles has had so many examples of this happening, and like low key
Yeah.
he's a sexual predator and shit as well. So like he is
Yeah.
very out of touch
High key.
and should be behind bars, to be honest.
Also, since when the fuck did he get a BBL? This is what I want to know. Like, when did he get a BBL? Because every time I see it, I'm just like, I don't feel bad saying it because I genuinely think he's a horrible person. Because yeah, but that's
Yeah.
who mine would be. So I was just curious who yours would be.
It's gonna have to be some American influencer because Loki, I think they are the most out of touch with reality. Do you know who I think is kind of maybe more adorably out of touch is 𝗃𝘁𝗃𝗃.
Oh my God, I can't lie. I love 𝗃𝘁𝗃𝗃.
Yeah, I
I
do as
can't
well, but I think
lie.
she is so out of touch.
She is out of touch, and she's also just she is actually also a bit of a horrible person. Like if you actually dive into like the 𝗃𝘁𝗃𝗃 law, but I only love her from the Frenemies podcast. Did you ever listen to that?
I've only seen clips of it.
What a era! What a era that was! That was the best time of my life. That was the best time of my life. Was the Frenemies podcast? I've never been obsessed with the podcast the way I was obsessed with this podcast. It was the
Really?
funniest I've ever listened to in my life. Like it was her and then Ethan Klein from the H3 podcast, which is a very like famous podcast. And oh my God, it was just the best. Like the law was unreal. That was the best time of my life. So
I think this is why I think she's like the most out of touch person because like the stuff that she comes out with, you're just like, what human would ever actually say that? Because
but like
she's so
some of the
out
stuff
of touch.
but like some of the stuff she says, I think you're so in touch because yeah.
It's so like philosophical that it almost loops around and it's like, oh,
Yeah.
you've blown
Yeah.
my mind with that. Yeah.
Honestly, she is hilarious. She is hilarious, but she is also very problematic. But I mean, most influencers are really. Do you know what I mean? Like most of
Yeah.
us. I don't know. I just said most of us. Most technically we're
Not me.
influencers. Technically,
I'm pretty down to
no.
earth. So,
You think you're down to earth? I'm joking.
yeah.
You are. No, I actually do think we're very down to earth. I mean, the thing is,
Savage.
no, the thing is, like, with the kind of content we create and like what we do, I think we have to be down to earth. Like, if we weren't, I just don't think. I mean, maybe someone's listening
Yeah.
to this and they're thinking, "God, that live girl, she's really out of touch." I hope not,
Yeah. I
but
think you're
there's always
really
going to be
out of
someone
touch,
with.
Liv, to be honest.
Do you think?
Yeah.
The thing is, there's always going to be someone with that perception of me. Like, there'll always be people who love you. There'll always. Anyway, why am I going into this? Why am I going into this? I'll just. This is the science podcast. Let's go. Let's get into the science, please. Let's go.
It's actually not about you, Liv, so stop
Yeah.
it.
The world doesn't revolve around you, Liv.
Oh my god, talking about revolving, evolving. That's what we're talking about today. So
Oh, that was a great segue.
let
Revolving, evolving. Let's get into it.
revolving rhymes with evolving. Let's get into it.
Perfect. Welcome to the So Cultured podcast.
Where we explore science and tech unfiltered.
We're your hosts, Liv and Taz, two girls who love STEM and spilling the tea.
Each season, we take on a new theme, whether it's busting conspiracy theories, celebrating women in STEM, or breaking down the science in your favourite sci-fi films.
And of course, in every episode, we spill the laboratory,
where we share your wildest stories from the world of science.
Let's get into this week's episode of So Cultured.
Okay, so today we are asking, what if humans are still evolving. So human evolution is often imagined as something ancient and finished. We kind of picture our ancestors crossing African savannas hundreds of thousands of years ago, stone tools in hand, slowly transforming into modern humans before evolution supposedly came to a stop. It is a surprisingly common belief that civilization somehow exempted us from the same biological forces that shape every other living organism on Earth. But scientific evidence tells a different story. Human beings are still indeed evolving. Actually, in some cases, evolution may even be happening faster than ever before. And the difference is that the pressures shaping us today are no longer only predators, famine, or harsh climates. Actually, other forces now directing human evolution are culture, technology, disease, migration, urbanization, artificial light, medicine, and even our own social systems. And perhaps most remarkably, humans may be the first species in Earth's history capable of consciously influencing the direction of its own evolution.
Oh my gosh, that is such an interesting concept to think about. I've never really thought about human evolution in that way. So that's so cool. But first, I feel like we should tackle like what evolution actually is and how has it shaped us in the past, I guess, because again, I feel like evolution is one of those terms that we all obviously talk about, we hear about a lot, but like how many people actually know scientifically what evolution actually is?
Yeah, 100%. Obviously, like every living organism on Earth, humans are products of evolution. So our story is inseparable from the history of life itself. Even if we go back far enough, roughly 4.2 billion years, every plant, fungus, bacterium, animal, and human shares a common ancestor, which is something we spoke about on the Origins of Viruses episode. And the same biological processes that shaped whales, trees, insects, and dinosaurs also shaped us. So evolution at its core is simply a change in heritable traits across generations. It happens whenever genetic variations appear in a population and some versions of genes become more common over time. And often this occurs through natural selection. So individuals carrying traits that improve survival or reproduction are more likely to pass those traits to future generations. And over thousands of generations, those traits can spread through entire population. But natural selection is actually only one mechanism of evolution. Evolution can also occur through genetic drift, gene flow, migration, mutation, and sexual selection. So together, these processes constantly reshape populations, sometimes slowly over millennia, or sometimes surprisingly fast within just a few generations.
I guess if you think about it, we can kind of see like evolution in the traits of different people around the world, right? Because you think about people like living in different areas or climates, or is that evolution, or is it just that I never is that dumb
Yeah,
to ask
yeah,
that?
it is
It's
exactly
dumb.
that. That wasn't, no, it's not.
I just said, is it dumb? And you were like, yeah.
Yeah, it's really dumb. No, that's correct.
Okay.
So
Oh
obviously,
gosh.
as humans spread across the planet, populations encountered radically different environments. So some groups adapted to freezing northern climates, others to tropical heat, high altitude mountains, deserts, dense forests, or even oceanic environments. And these pressures left measurable signatures on the human genome. So one of the clearest modern examples comes from the 𝗾𝘂𝗲𝗀𝗀 people of Southeast Asia. Often they're referred to as sea nomads. And for generations, the 𝗾𝘂𝗲 have lived almost entirely connected to the ocean, spending really long amounts of time underwater whilst hunting fish by freediving. And so the average person can hold their breath underwater for perhaps 1 or 2 minutes before oxygen deprivation becomes overwhelming. But 𝗾𝘂𝗲 divers routinely descend more than 60 meters and can
Oh
remain
my
underwater
gosh.
for over 10 minutes. I know, it's literally crazy.
Mm.
Now, at first, this seems like an extraordinary example of training and practice, but research revealed something a bit deeper. So the 𝗲𝘂𝗃 actually possess spleens that are significantly larger than those of other populations, and in some cases up to 50% larger. And so the spleen actually acts as a reservoir for oxygen-rich red blood cells. So during these extended dives, it contracts and releases these cells into circulation, temporarily increasing the amount of oxygen available to the body. And actually, marine mammals like seals and whales possess really similar adaptations as well. And importantly, 𝗲𝘂𝗃 individuals who do not actively dive still tend to also have enlarged spleens. So this demonstrated that the trait was not merely the result of exercising and conditioning and like repeated dives, but actually had a genetic basis. And scientists identified changes in genes such as PDE10A and BDKRB2, and that is associated with spleen regulation and the human diving reflex. So over many generations, individuals better suited to prolonged diving would have been more successful in securing food and surviving within this maritime lifestyle. And gradually, these traits became increasingly common within the population. Now, this is evolution happening not in some distant prehistoric past, but within relatively recent human history. And actually, another example comes from the Himalayas, where populations such as the Tibetans evolved really remarkable tolerance to low oxygen environments. So at altitudes where many people suffer altitude sickness or potential fatal complications, these populations can thrive. So their adaptations involve genes regulating oxygen transport and blood physiology. Rather than simply producing more red blood cells, Tibetan populations evolved more efficient oxygen usage strategies. So these changes allow survival in environments containing around 40% less oxygen than sea level conditions.
Oh my God, this is so interesting because I would almost consider them like kind of like extreme environments. You know what I mean? Like low oxygen environments or like being underwater is obviously not where you just typically expect humans to live. So it makes me wonder, like, are there many evolutionary traits not related to oxygen deprivation from being underwater or like living at high altitudes?
No, there's actually so many examples, and probably like too many examples to go into on this one podcast. But one I find really interesting is in the Andes of Argentina. There's another population that demonstrates a really different kind of adaptation. So here, there's a population of people that have consumed groundwater that is naturally contaminated with arsenic, and they've been consuming that for thousands of years. So the arsenic levels are roughly 20 times higher than what is considered safe for most humans. And I don't know if you know, but arsenic is really highly toxic. It interferes with cellular metabolism and enzyme function, and it historically earned the nickname the king of poisons because of its potency, lack of taste, and difficulty of detection. But these local populations showed surprisingly little evidence of arsenic poisoning. Genetic analysis actually revealed variants of the AS3MT gene involved in arsenic detoxification that appear especially efficient in processing and eliminating arsenic from the body. So this may represent one of the clearest examples of humans evolving resistant to toxic environmental chemicals and just like toxic things in general, to be honest.
I've never ever heard of that before. So this is the cool shit that I feel like we need to learn about in school because that's like insane. And I just think that's so crazy how like they're still like this population still exists and they're still consuming this groundwater that has arsenic in, and like they've just got this genetic mutation that almost like protects them from that. Like that's just crazy. It does also make me think, I wonder if there's any examples where like certain traits previously helped a population but in the modern day it's not really needed, only because I was quite surprised that like this population in Argentina are still there and they're still like drinking this water in like modern day. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, obviously, evolution, it doesn't predict the future. It's kind of, it only responds to past conditions. And yeah, I feel like if this population was no longer consuming this arsenic groundwater, then I'm not sure it would have too much of a issue, because it would just mean that they're not needing some sort of like arsenic detoxification gene. But in a scenario that you're saying here, where evolution previously helped population, but in the modern day it's not really needed, is called a evolutionary mismatch. So in Kenya, the Turkana people are a really good example of this. Historically and presently living in arid environments with limited water availability and diets heavily based on milk, meat, and animal fat, they face constant dehydration and high metabolic stress. So researchers identified variants of the 𝗾𝘂𝗃𝗀𝗯 gene that help the kidneys conserve water and tolerate high salt concentrations and protein-heavy diets. So over thousands of years, these populations adapted physiologically to chronic dehydration conditions that would be dangerous for many other humans. But when Turkana individuals transition into urban lifestyles and adopt modern diets today, rates of metabolic disease often rise really sharply. And this is because their bodies remain adapted for ancestral environmental conditions while their surroundings change rapidly around them, and they no longer are living in these environmental conditions. So that is a perfect example of what you're referring to.
That is such an interesting example. Also, have never heard of that, but it makes so much sense. But I feel like you've told us about a few different examples, and it seems so varied in the things that can kind of be the drivers of human evolution. But do you think there's, for example, like one really strong thing, or like maybe one main thing that is like the strongest driver of human evolution, or no? Because this seems a bit like there's so many different things that can impact it.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it would be disease 100%, because obviously before antibiotics and modern medicine, infectious diseases killed enormous numbers of people. And so any genetic variation improving survival would then spread rapidly through populations, right? So one really important example involves the caspase-12 gene, which is associated with immune responses to bacterial infection. So individuals carrying highly active versions of this gene are more susceptible to severe sepsis during infection. And then in contrast, inactive versions dramatically reduce the risk of fatal inflammatory responses like sepsis. So over time, inactive forms of the gene became increasingly common in many populations because they improve survival against bacterial disease. Similarly, the sickle cell trait represents a really classic evolutionary trade-off. So individuals carrying one copy of the sickle cell mutation gain significant resistance to malaria, which is a major selective advantage in regions where malaria is widespread. But carrying two copies causes sickle cell disease itself. So what you can take away from this is evolution often produces compromises shaped by environmental pressures. And actually, modern diseases continue to influence human genetics today. So studies in South Africa identified genetic variants within the HLA immune system genes that help certain individuals better control HIV infection. Other populations, particularly in Europe, carry variants in the CCR5 gene that hinder HIV's ability to infect cells. And interestingly, the CCR5 mutation predates the modern AIDS epidemic by thousands of years, suggesting it may originally have evolved in response to entirely different historical diseases, but obviously have an effect today. And all of these examples directly challenge the idea that human evolution stopped once sort of civilization emerged.
Yeah, I've never really thought about that, but I do feel like a lot of people do just kind of think that humans, like, we're just done. We're done evolving. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's kind of a crazy concept that a lot of people would also think that, like, civilization itself didn't affect evolution in some way. So, like, I would kind of expect that it would in some way accelerate. human evolution? Am I right in thinking that?
Well, actually, that's a really fundamental question about evolution, because some scientists once argued that humans had experienced essentially no biological change in 40 or 50,000 years, and that civilization had been built using fundamentally the same brains and bodies as our ancient ancestors. The argument was that cultural evolution had replaced biological evolution. So once humans developed technology, language, agriculture, medicine, and social systems, culture supposedly became more important than genes. But in fact, more recent research increasingly suggests that civilization may have accelerated human evolution rather than halted it. So agriculture alone dramatically transformed human biology. Once humans shifted from hunter-gatherer lifestyles into farming societies, diets changed, disease exposure increased, settlement density exploded, and entirely new selection pressures emerged. So living in crowded settlements is another one. It exposed humans to pathogens transmitted through poor sanitation, close contact with domesticated animals, and contaminated water. Civilization essentially created evolutionary pressures that simply did not exist for most of human history. And some of the changes appear surprisingly recent. So human brains, for example, they may have shrunk by roughly 10 to 15% in volume over the last 20 to 30,000 years, because some researchers suggest that this reduction accelerated after the rise of agriculture and large-scale societies. And one explanation is that collective living reduced the need for every individual to independently solve survival problems. Knowledge became distributed socially rather than individually, and humans increasingly relied on cooperation, specialization, and cultural inheritance. Even traits like eye color are evolutionary recent. So, blue eyes likely emerged from a mutation in the 𝗂𝘂𝗃 gene around 6,000 years ago, and a similar trend appears in our jaws and teeth. So, soft diets and food processing technologies reduce those selective pressures, favoring large jaws and strong chewing muscles. And as a result, modern humans increasingly lack sufficient room for wisdom teeth. And it's also increasingly why people need braces more and more, because our ancestors, they didn't have crowded teeth, they had perfectly straight teeth, and it's because our diets have changed so much over the years that actually we don't need these massive jaws and more space in those jaws for our teeth, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's so interesting. The thing that I'm like hung up on though is what you said about like how our brains have shrunk. Because sorry to be this person bringing up AI all the time, but I do think it's very interesting how AI actually might impact then human evolution going forward, because everyone obviously says that like we're getting dumber because of AI. And what you just said about like collective living and the reasons behind why that affected evolution, you can see how AI might influence human evolution now in a similar way. So has technology played a role in human evolution? I guess maybe we haven't seen it yet, or do you expect it to?
Yeah, I mean, that's not even an aspect I even thought about really, but that is true. I mean, even just with the age of the internet, you don't have to constantly hold on to information that you learned about from one person one time. Like you could just look it up on the internet. So yeah, even with the age of AI, that probably enhanced that process even more. But we have seen examples in the past of technology sort of changing our traits. And we actually covered this a little bit in the Origins of Sleep episode, but artificial light was a really key player in human evolution. So for millions of years, human circadian rhythms evolved under predictable cycles of sunlight and darkness. But modern societies expose humans to constant illumination, screens, indoor environments, and disrupted sleep patterns. So some researchers argue that this shift may already be affecting genes associated with vision and circadian rhythm. So rates of myopia, which is short-sightedness, have risen dramatically over recent decades, especially in populations spending less time outdoors and more time focusing on screens or near objects indoors. And in many ways, humans remain biologically adapted for environments that no longer exist. Like our brains evolved to respond intensely to sugar, fat, novelty, social status, and immediate threats because those responses once improved our survival. But modern industrial environments exploit those ancient instincts continuously. So this mismatch between ancient biology and modern conditions may explain the rising rates of obesity, anxiety disorders, sleep disruption, and metabolic disease. Another thing is medical technology. It's another driver of evolution, also scientific advancement. Humans increasingly solve problems culturally far faster than evolution could solve genetically. And scientists call this cultural preemption. So a really good example of this is childbirth. So historically, babies with unusually large heads relative to the mother's pelvis often resulted in fatal births for mother, child, or both. And today, caesarean sections allow many of these births to succeed safely. And this means that traits that once might have been strongly selected against can now persist and spread through populations because medical technology bypasses previous biological constraints. So basically, you could imagine like women's hips getting smaller, that there's literally no need for women's hips to grow wider because the baby doesn't have to go through the birth canal anymore. So that's like one really, really good example. And this exact same principle applies everywhere in the modern society. So glasses now compensate for our poor eyesight. Vaccines reduce mortality from infectious disease. Heat and air conditioning buffer climate extremes. Agriculture prevents starvation. Hospitals sustain individuals who would once not have survived. So honestly, we're like changing the limits of evolution all the time. And we are increasingly not relying on biology, but on complex systems of technology, infrastructure, and collective cooperation. Some researchers are suggesting that this represents a profound evolutionary transition, something that we're seeing in real time, because we, rather than evolving primarily as isolated individuals competing against nature, humans may now be evolving as components within highly interconnected social superorganisms. So in this view, survival depends less on individual genetic fitness and more on participation within functioning cultural systems, so governments, hospitals, transportation networks, education systems, agriculture, energy infrastructure, and really importantly, digital communication. And an individual isolated entirely from these systems would struggle to survive for very long. Modern humans are deeply dependent on collective knowledge accumulated across generations, and this dependence creates a feedback loop. So the more technologically complex society becomes, the more dependent humans become on maintaining and expanding those systems. Kind of what you mentioned, Niv, about AI, like we're becoming more and more dependent on technology, and like some people could, like we see it in with elderly generations, like we're becoming so technologically advanced that our grandparents don't have access to certain things because they don't physically know how to access the technology required, like even just the internet. And services are becoming like more and more on the internet, and they kind of like grow with the technology that's available. So if you are like left in the dark ages, let's say, then you are left out and you are going to struggle and not survive as well as someone who keeps up with everything.
Yeah, honestly, that is like an inherent fear of mine, that when I'm older, I'm going to be like that old person who doesn't know how anything works. Like, do you think we're either going to be like so clever that we're going to know how everything works and they're going to be like, oh my God, they're so wise because like we've been here from the beginning? Or are they going to be like, or it is going to advance so much that we're not going to be able to keep up with it? Like, I always think about this, especially like as a tech creator, I'm like, what one is it going to be? Like, it's definitely a very interesting thing to think about. But in what ways will human evolution continue to change, do you think? Like, in other words, what will affect it now that we might not expect to affect it? Obviously, we've spoken about AI, but like, is there anything else, do you think?
Yeah, one of the main ones is human migration. So global interconnection is huge. Obviously, that wasn't really a thing in the past. We can now get a flight to anywhere. Throughout much of history, populations remained relatively isolated, and that allowed those distinct local adaptations to emerge, like the ones I've already spoke about in today's episode. But today, globalization, migration, and intermarriage increasingly mix human populations together. And this widespread gene flow reduces isolation and may decrease the likelihood of strongly localized adaptations like those seen in the 𝗾𝘂𝗲𝗀𝗯𝗯 or Tibetan populations. But at the same time, mixing populations generates enormous new combinations of genetic diversity. And on top of this, evolution is not only about survival, it's also about reproduction. So throughout nature, traits evolve because they influence mate choice. So peacock feathers, antlers, bird songs, and countless other features evolved not because they necessarily improve survival, but because they increase reproductive success. And humans are no exception to this. So physical appearance, social intelligence, status, personality, creativity, and other traits all potentially influence mate selection. And the preferences that humans hold today may shape future populations in subtle ways over generations. Exactly how modern social systems, online interaction, and changing cultural norms will influence sexual selection. Now, how that will influence your mate selection and future evolution remains uncertain, but they will undoubtedly play some role. Maybe we'll all look like some stereotypical version of the celebrities we see online, which I also think we are kind of seeing in real time. I mean, obviously, that's not necessarily evolution, but we're definitely seeing behaviors that are going towards this and wanting to look a certain way. And yeah, we're becoming increasingly materialistic, right? And increasingly about looks in like this social media world. So I don't know. It will be definitely interesting. And then, of course, we also have to talk about merging with machines. So, the future of human evolution may involve biology and technology becoming inseparable. So, we've got gene editing technologies like CRISPR, which already allow scientists to alter DNA with remarkable precision. And obviously, it's still controversial and very heavily regulated, but those sorts of tools may eventually allow humans to intentionally modify traits linked to disease susceptibility, aging, or physiology. And then scientists are also exploring neural interfaces, which we've covered in past episodes, prosthetics, artificial organs, and brain machine integration. Even today, hearing aids can record sound and connect wirelessly to phones. Experimental bionic eyes aim to restore vision to blind patients, and future technologies may eventually enhance senses beyond ordinary human capability, potentially allowing perception of infrared light or other invisible wavelengths. And so the boundary between biology and technology may become increasingly blurred. And finally, my favorite potential impacts to human evolution is space travel. So I'm actually reading, I think I've mentioned this already in this series, but I'm actually reading a book series called Red Rising, and it's about the human race in many hundreds, maybe thousands of years' time. And they've basically colonized different planets, and the races on each planet have adapted to their planet. So Mars, for instance, it has lower gravity and receives far less sunlight than Earth. So over many generations, human populations living there could potentially evolve different skeletal structures, vision adaptations, or metabolic changes suited to Martian conditions. So reduced gravity might favor taller bodies and elongated spines. Lower light levels could influence eye structure and circadian biology. But obviously, we're getting pretty speculative now, but I did want to include this in the episode because I think it's so interesting to think about, like all the different angles that evolution could go in, because evolution over only 1,000 years would be subtle unless combined with intentional genetic engineering or advanced biotechnology. But the broader point remains, human evolution has not stopped. It's simply entering really unfamiliar territory.
I'd never really thought about human evolution alongside advanced biotechnology. Like, that is a crazy thing to think about, and how much that's going to change potentially human evolution. Like, I've just never really thought about that, like pairing the two. Really, I feel like they need to do like a Black Mirror episode on that. Like, they 100% need a Black Mirror episode on human evolution paired with biotech, because that would make for a great episode. I can't lie. But I do wonder, human evolution, obviously you just mentioned we're entering like unfamiliar territory, but obviously given like the nature of humans on Earth and how we now are responsible for so many different things, like differences and like animal migration, just like in general how animals live their life, I also wonder like what are the implications of human evolution on literally every single animal on the planet. Is that a very broad question?
No, not at all. I mean, humans now function as what some scientists call 𝗾𝘂𝗶𝗀𝗀𝗯 species, because they exert enormous evolutionary influence across the planet. Deforestation obviously has altered camouflage strategies all around the world. Urban environments changing bird behavior, insect evolution, and even plant biology, and antibiotic use drives bacterial evolution constantly. And actually, one really fascinating example are Japanese 𝗾𝘂𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗯𝗃 crabs. Now, their shells resemble fierce samurai faces, and according to folklore, they embody reincarnated warriors. But scientists suspect fishermen historically threw these unusual crabs back into the ocean out of this superstition, and this unintentionally selected for crab shell patterns that looked increasingly human-like over generations. So I just wanted to leave you with that really fun fact about crabs that look like samurai warriors because of like
so cool.
Superstition.
I need to look up a picture of them. I want to see what it looks like.
We'll put a picture on screen if you're watching the episode. Okay, so obviously in answer to our question, what if humans are still evolving? They absolutely are, and evolution never stops unless extinction occurs and we wipe out an entire species. But what is so interesting about human evolution is that for billions of years, evolution unfolded without intention. Random mutations met environmental pressures and life adapted blindly, generation after generation. But now, for the first time in Earth's history, one species understands the process itself, and that realization may become one of the most important evolutionary developments of all.
Oh my God, that's crazy when you put it like that. I hadn't really thought about that. Like, we are the first species to understand evolution and therefore potentially, influence evolution. And like you just said, what do you call us? Our 𝗾𝘂𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗃
Keystone species, yeah.
That's very interesting. And I love to know the term for that, because that's what I was trying to explain, like before you said what it was. That's what I was trying to like put into words what we are. So now I know 𝗾𝘂𝗃𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗃. Yeah, that's so crazy to think about that. Like, now we understand it, and like definitely we're going to influence it 100%. Intentionally or unintentionally, we will 100% influence it. And then to know that we will influence every other species potential evolution is crazy to think about.
Yeah, it is crazy. So, it's mind-blowing. I want to know what we look like in another 1,000 years if we're still on the planet.
I just don't think we'll look that different. I don't know.
I really think we would. I think our brains would shrink and we'd be
100%. Our brains are gonna be fucked, mate. I honestly think we're gonna have our brains will be fucked. We'll be all cryogenically preserved, and we'll have.
It'll be like WALL-E.
Yeah, and we'll be conscious. Like, our conscious will be uploaded to something, and we'll be off with like other alien species, but like in some digital world.
Yeah,
that's actually, do you know what, if I really want to summarize everything I've learned on this podcast over all the different topics that we've done, that is my conclusion of the future. Like, literally, That is it. I'm not even actually being sarcastic or trying to be funny. Like, genuinely, that's what I believe. Some version
or
of
we'll
that
be
is
like
what we're going to end
traveling
up
across
as.
space to escape the planet that we've ultimately destroyed, or we'll enter a simulation to save the planet that we've destroyed, and we'll look like a version of what's in 𝗰𝘂𝗲𝗀𝗯, where everyone is kind of like horizontal, looking at a screen.
Yes.
And everything is so...
But we won't even be looking at the screen. Our consciousness will be somewhere else in a different simulation.
Yeah.
Like, that's not this world. It's like a better world because we fucked the one that we're on. 100%. Wow, what a lovely note to end on. I love that.
Yeah, but really if we're like that, what would our body even look like?
The backs of us would just be flat. Just laying down.
We'll just be a pancake. We wouldn't have any use for bones. Maybe we'd just be like a pile of goop.
Just a little soup. Just laying there.
Just a little soup.
Do we even need our eyes anymore? We don't even need them.
We won't need eyes.
We'll be uploaded.
Soup brain in a camera. Brain in a vat.
That's what we'll be. We'll just be our brain, like suspended in some soup somewhere. Oh, this is funny. No, don't worry, guys. This is not how we're going to end up. Maybe it is. I don't know who the knows. But anyway, Taz, thank you so much for this episode. This was a really different episode, I feel, to all of the other episodes that we've done in this series. So I thoroughly enjoyed it. But for now, I think it's about time we get on to our laboratory section of today's episode. This episode is sponsored by 𝘰, the smart citation tool for your everyday research needs. Taz, I don't know about you, but I think 𝘰 really sets itself apart from other citation and reference tools.
Yeah, I feel the same. With 𝘰, not only do you have access to over 250 million papers, but it can summarize a paper into a report, format citations, and more.
Yeah, and not only that, but I also love that you can connect it to tools like ChatGPT, Claude, or Copilot, and it basically just upgrades how those tools actually handle research.
Yeah, so instead of getting a general answer, your AI is actually searching through a huge database of research papers, and the key thing is it's not just looking at the titles or abstracts, it's searching inside the full text.
Honestly, it's such a slay because it just makes such a big difference, because a lot of important details don't really show up in abstracts, and I feel like most tools just miss that completely.
On top of that is the smart citations feature, which I think is one of the most useful features because it doesn't just show how many times a paper's been cited, it also shows how it's been cited.
Yeah, you can see whether other researchers have supported the findings, contradicted them, or whether they've just mentioned them. So it gives you a much clearer picture of what other experts in the field feel about it.
It also helps with access. So if a paper is available to you, 𝘰 will help you get the full text.
So if you want to try it, you can head to 𝘰.ai, or you can find the link in today's episode or video description. Setup only takes a minute, and you can use the code on screen now for money off. And thank you so much to 𝘰 for sponsoring today's episode. But for now, let's get back into it. But I'm worth it, 'cause I'll slip into your dreams tonight. Okay, so the tagline for today's laboratory is: should I publish my research paper under my husband's name? Okay, let's get into this because this is going to be a lot. So it says, I am in the first year of my PhD and I have just started writing my first paper. Pop off, Queen. That is so good because I was not doing that in the first year of my PhD. So that's great. Yeah. Okay. However, as a 2027 bride, I am panicking about what name I should publish this paper in. I have been told once you publish, you have to keep this name throughout your career. I would really like to avoid using my current surname for the rest of my life. However, I am low-key embarrassed to publish in a name that isn't actually my name yet. What would you do in this situation? Well, I feel like I can't really say much in this because I am single and I am a man hater. Unless you're a man who listens to this podcast, in which case I love you, but I'm a man hater. But Taz, I mean, this is very topical for you because you are newly engaged. So what are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really, I mean, it's too late for me. So I'm too far gone. I've already published in my maiden name. But to be honest, like, I'm not going to change my name anyway. So this isn't really applicable to me because, like, yeah, I want to keep
You're
my
not going to change your name
name.
at all, like.
No,
Interesting.
not legally. My name is 𝗾𝘂𝗫𝗃𝗃, and I ain't changing
Yeah,
it.
I don't think I would change my name either. Like, I
Also,
don't
it's a
really
very UK centric idea
think.
that because I think in some places you pick the best one, some places you double barrel it. So I don't know. I don't want to
Double
get rid of
barreling
my
it is
name.
nice. I
Yeah.
think double barreling it is nice. Or, yeah, I don't know. I just think, like, what do I have to gain from taking your surname? Like, what am I gaining?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess some people do
Like,
it for
trouble.
like if they have kids and then they have like cohesive family name, but I
Yeah, I
don't
get
even really
that.
care about that. I just want to keep my name. But
Yeah.
obviously, we're not talking about me. We're talking about the listener who does want to take her husband's name. But one of the
Mm-hmm.
things I think here is not necessarily true is that you can't change your name. Like, you can change your name. Like, if you publish, or if I was to publish in my maiden name and then I got married and I wanted to then publish in my husband's last name, then you can change your name. But, like, it's just logistically it's a bit long because then you have to like try and link all the papers to you, if that makes sense. So yeah.
Yeah, I feel like from that sentence, that's what I was taking from it, is that people have told them, like, not necessarily that you can't do it, but that it's a really bad idea. Because a lot of people say, like, it's a bad idea to do that because, like you say, trying to link up papers, once you've published like 3 papers in your field, then if you publish in a different name, then like a lot of people don't know you, do they? They just know your name. So I feel like I do get it. Like, it definitely would be hard. But also, like, you're so early on in your career that I'm like, Loki, would it even matter? Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
but do you know what annoys me though is I think about this all the time, and I think if it was the man that had to change their name when they got married, there would be a solution for this. There would be a solution, but because it's women that have to deal with it, there's not really any ideal solution. But I just feel like if it was men, they would have made up a method or some system that goes back and changes all of your past papers to your new name. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I guess you have like orchid IDs and like that then links like the papers and stuff, but yeah,
Yeah, but
it's
it's
not
just
changing your name.
no, and it's just not the same, is it? Do you know what I mean? Because I don't think I've ever fucking looked at anyone's orchid ID. Like, I might go and look at someone's orchid profile, but I don't look at
Yeah.
their orchid ID. And it's ultimately it's not what's on the paper, right? Do you know what I mean? And even if it
Yeah.
was, I'm not going to be like, oh, this is orchid 52167. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just remember their
Yeah.
name. Like, we don't remember orchid IDs. So I get it, but it's like someone
Yeah.
has to click on your profile to then see everything. So I don't really feel like it solves the issue. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. But also, what I'm thinking about this is, what about women who do publish in their husband's name and then get a divorce? Like, what do they then do? Because, like, do they
Right?
carry on publishing in their husband's
Imagine he
name
does
or
something
what?
really awful, like he like cheats on you with like your sister or something, and then you're like tied to that. Do
I
you know what I
mean,
mean?
God
Like, you'd be
forbid. God
fuming.
forbid.
I mean,
Yeah.
my personal opinion is that I would keep everything in your maiden name, because like whatever's name you use for your scientific publications doesn't have to reflect your legal name. I don't think so. So I might be
No,
wrong, but I'm pretty
it
sure it
doesn't.
doesn't. So I'm
No.
like, if I was you, I would just stick with the maiden name, because if he ever cheats on you with his sister, which by the way, God forbid, and I wish you all the luck in your marriage, and I don't think that's going to happen to you. I'm just saying that like these things can happen, that I think it's just smart to keep your maiden name personally. However, I do feel that the listener wants to publish in their like husband's name, but they are worried or like they feel embarrassed, which I just think you don't need to feel embarrassed at all. Like, if that's what you want to do, there's absolutely no reason for you to feel embarrassed about that. I don't think so. Like, what are we embarrassed for? You're going to be married to this man in a few months. You're going to be taking his name, so that is going to be your legal name. So for me, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. And actually, not everyone puts their actual name down. Like, you have people who have name preferences and they will put their like preferred name on a paper. You don't have people always putting their legal birth certificate name on papers. Like, they put their preferred name sometimes. So I think like if that's your preferred name and your husband's last name is your
What you
preferred
want.
name, then you can do that. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Also, I just think
Because
like obviously we gave you like absolute scientific cred for publishing a paper in the first year of your PhD. I think that's like really great, but if you were concerned about it, you could just wait until after you get married to publish the paper, because then surely you'd only be in
yeah.
like your second year of PhD. So there is that option as well. But
Also, if you only just started writing it up, let's be honest, it probably won't actually be accepted until you're married anyway. Like, that's not me
yeah,
being negative. That's just like the reality
no,
of scientific publishing. So
yeah.
by the time it goes to it, you could just say, "Oh, I've got married now, and here's my name change." I don't think you even need to worry about it realistically, like logistically, until it's actually accepted for publication. So I
Yeah,
think you have
because they
time to
always
think about
ask,
it.
like, make sure you check all the details and all the
Yeah.
authors confirm their details. And that is like the very, very last thing you do before it gets uploaded to the
Hmm.
journal. So I think you've got until then, until to like make that decision. But I absolutely don't think it's embarrassing to publish in your husband's name if that's what you want to do. So
I agree. I
yeah.
agree. I mean, yeah, so you asked what we would do. My personal opinion, and no one's opinion is right over anybody else's, because everybody is allowed to make their own decision when it comes to this. But my personal opinion is I would publish in my maiden name and I would keep it
Hmm.
that way forever. But I also think if you would like to go for your husband's name, do it. Whatever you want,
Yeah.
whatever feels right for you. Because ultimately, if he does cheat on you with his sister, which he's not going to do, God forbid, if he does, you just change it back. And is it the end of the world? No. Slightly annoying, but
Nah.
make sure you connect up those orchid IDs, girl, because 58214
Connect them up.
6.
That's why it's there. Or
Yeah,
actually invent
it's not
some
why it's there though.
program that
Yeah.
goes retrospectively back and changes your name in all the papers. You could do that as well.
Yeah, that probably doesn't exist. Do any of our listeners have thoughts on this? Because I feel like this is a very topical topic for women in academia. So I feel like our listeners are going to have their own thoughts, feelings, and maybe even advice. And maybe some of our listeners have actually been through this. They have their own
Hmm.
experiences. So if that's you, please write in and let us know, or leave a comment on any of our social medias, because we'll probably post a little clip from this. So head over to our Instagram, make sure you drop a comment with your own experience, or you can leave us a comment on Spotify. But for now, that rounds up episode 9 of What If. So make sure you join us next week for our final episode of season 8, What If. We are so sad, but also very excited for the final episode because it's always a fun one. So yeah, make sure you join us next Wednesday, but we will see you guys then. So bye everyone.
Bye.